Hvordan vil fornybar energi forandre Afrika? Mugo Kibati, styreleder i M-KOPA Solar og Lake Turkana Wind Power, skal fortelle oss om det enorme potensialet for vind- og solenergi på det afrikanske kontinentet. Ta ham vel imot!
Good dag. I tried learning good afternoon, I couldn't make it, so they taught me how to say good day. Well, my name is Mugo Kibati, and as you see up here, I chair Lake Turkana Wind Power, which is an on-grid wind station that we just completed a couple of months ago, 310 megawatts. But I also chair M-KOPA Solar, which I'll speak about a little later, which is an off-grid company. I just want to spend a couple of minutes setting some context before I go into my presentation very quickly to talk about Kenya. The country I come from is Kenya. And as many of you might or may not be aware, we're in a long-running election. We just announced our president-elect for the second time in 2.5 months yesterday. And I know that for people who are not Kenyan, it's a very confusing state of affairs and events. So let me say that Kenya is considered to be one of the more advanced countries in sub-Saharan Africa. That is, African countries north of South Africa and south of the Maghreb. It really is the hub of East Africa. But over the last 20 years, Kenyans have been going through a process of transformation that culminated primarily in a new constitution 7 years ago, in 2010. That constitution is what is being tested in the current election cycle, because it created a number of independent institutions, one being the judiciary headed by the Supreme Court. And just 2 months ago, a historic event for Kenyans as well as Africans, the Supreme Court flexed its independent muscles and annulled the presidential election that has just been held in August. And all of us were very curious how we would react as Kenyans. We're not accustomed to a strong judiciary being able to flex its muscles, and how the executive would react. And we are still in that process. Suffice to say that while all this is going on, Kenya continues apace. In the middle of all that, we completed our project, Lake Turkana Wind Power Project, and we continued deep into the election a month and a half ago, talking to the government about the challenge that we are facing with the transmission line that's supposed to connect this particular power plant to the national grid. Just to say that the process we're going through is one I think will make us much stronger. Because rather than focus on burying our heads in the sand in the name of stability, we are testing the many underlying issues that Kenya faces for the last 30, 40 years. Other than the constitution, the second thing that Kenya has done over the last 10 years is to introduce Kenya's Vision 2030. Kenya's Vision 2030 is the national 22-year, 2008 to 2030, transformation plan that is to take Kenya from developing nation status, third world status, to a middle-income country by the year 2030. I was privileged to be the first chief executive of Kenya's Vision 2030, with establishing the particular infrastructure that today, which year number 9 of Vision 2030, we are continuing with. Amongst the Vision 2030 flagship projects was Lake Turkana Wind Power, which is a private sector project, but considered to be part of Vision 2030. With that little context, let me talk about these particular projects. Now, Lake Turkana, it's situated in the northern part of Kenya. And the northern part of Kenya is a pretty remote and underdeveloped part of Kenya, even by Kenyan standards. And this is the first project of its size and magnitude and sophistication ever to be undertaken, with shareholders, including some familiar names, such as Norfront, which you can see over there, as some of our shareholders. The project commenced December, the actual physical project. The financial part of it had gone on for a number of years. December 2014 and completed this year. On 40,000 acres, as I mentioned earlier on, 365 turbines, 310 megawatts. So the only challenge, as I said, is the government of Kenya is still building the transmission line to connect the project to the grid. A 70 billion Kenya shilling, 625 million euro project. It's the largest single private sector investment in Kenyan history in one project. And it's important to understand that 310 megawatts will be about 15% of the total installed capacity in Kenya. Now, I'm going to skip this slide just because of time. I think I'll be in a panel tomorrow where I'll be talking a lot more about this. And I just want to say that M-KOPA Solar, which is the other company that I chair, is a different animal altogether. This is a home solar project. And essentially what you have is off-grid solutions, and what you can see there is a TV screen, 3 lights, overhead lights, 1 flashlight, a transistor radio, a phone charger, plus the communication system that communicates, that is able to determine and ensure that the pay-as-you-go mobile payments are done and recorded by the company. This, on the right side, you have the starter set, including the 8 kilowatt solar panel. For the TV solution, you have a 16 kilowatt overhead solar panel. This comes in for a deposit of $30. $30 is a significant amount of money for the lowest income households in Kenya. But that's a deposit they have to pay. And then thereafter, pay an equivalent of 50 US cents every day. They can pay either daily, weekly, monthly, as long as it's an average of 50 US cents every day for 13 more months. And they own that. As we go into the future, this is what M-KOPA is working on, including solar-powered fridges, sound systems, stoves, basically the whole gamut of appliances an average household would want to have solar-powered by a home solar system. Now, I've spoken about on-grid, off-grid. And before I go to that, the ask really, today we have a lot of focus and attention on the traditional grid solutions. So a lot of the financing is available from governments, from multilateral partners, and even from the private sector, focuses on the grid. There isn't enough, as far as we're concerned, focusing on off-grid and mini-grid solutions. And I'll come to that. As I said, M-KOPA today, 500,000 households, 2.5 million people in Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania are on M-KOPA solutions. And just to highlight the juxtaposition between the grid solutions and the off-grid solutions. This is out of Ethiopia, where you have a family, Weko Tesfaye, who has grid availability right outside his home, his family's home. But they're still spending $200 plus on kerosene every year. And phone charging batteries, they use car batteries to charge their phones. And this is why I come to the discussion about grid versus off-grid. The way we view it, it's complementarity. Just again to give context, Kenya, which as I indicated is one of the more advanced countries in Africa, has a total installed capacity of approximately 2 gigawatts for 45 million people. Norway, 5 million people, 30 gigawatts. Let me repeat that. Kenya, one of the more advanced countries in Africa, 45 million people, 2 gigawatts, total installed capacity. Norway, 5 million people, 30 gigawatts. And remember, I spoke about Vision 2030 and our ambition to grow into a middle-income country by 2030, when we shall approximately have about 65 million Kenyans. The point I'm trying to make is, we don't have the luxury of choice. We need every solution. Grid, off-grid, mini-grid, all those solutions are required in most African countries today. In the 2 gigawatt, we have about 50%, over 50% actually, about 60% renewable energy, geothermal and hydro. And when we add the 310 megawatts of this wind power, it will be about 70%. A very commendable, in my view, advancement towards renewables. That a country that is so deficient in energy will, in about a year and a half's time, be 70% renewable energy. And with this 310 megawatts of wind energy, actually displacing fuel energy, which is at a much more expensive rate. We're at about 8.5 US cents, replacing 20 plus US cents fuel. Now, my time is out. I just want to conclude by saying that when it comes to countries like Kenya and many other African and developing world countries, we have the challenge of using fossil fuel-driven energy. And being, there are 2 coal projects planned for Kenya. The challenge is, we are adding 310 megawatts of wind. There's a few solar projects, but we need to grow at about 1,000 megawatts, a gigawatt per year for the next 15 years. The solution we look for is, can we do a gigawatt per year for the next 15 years and make it renewable? We can't afford the capital investment. And there lies a challenge for countries like Kenya and other low-income African countries and developing world countries. Thank you all very much.